We bow our heads in prayer as we commence our time in the book of Genesis today. Most High God, we thank you for allowing us to be here another time as we congregate in your house. We pray that your presence will be with us. Father, forgive us of our sins and our iniquity. Pray, O God, that you'll heal our lands, pour out your Spirit upon us, bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, even as we open up your holy words. We ask these favors in the precious anointed name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. Anybody remember where we left off last week? Yeah. Where we left off? Was what?
To 25?
Yeah, no. Okay, we pick up at verse 20. Verse 20, so we don't miss out on anything. It said in verse 20 of Genesis chapter 47, and Joseph bought all the lands of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's. So as we were saying last week that theologians, what they are saying is that we can't blame Joseph for what is happening here because of the fact that Joseph bought all of the lands from the Egyptian people. We saw before where he took all of the monies that the people in Egypt and the people of Canaan had, and he exchanged money for the food. And then we see where he took all of their animals, and then he took away also their lands. So what interpreters are saying that we can't really hold Joseph responsible for these things because of the fact that Joseph is not taking these things for himself. The land, for instance, he started out with the money. All of the money that he took from the people, he placed it in the Pharaoh's treasury. And also he took the people's animals, all of the animals, it was for Pharaoh. Then we saw where he took their lands, also that was for Pharaoh. Then the last thing he did, he took them in as slaves. And all of that was for Pharaoh. So therefore, what they're saying is that Joseph did not receive any benefit. He did not profit from any of these things that we might consider to be wrong. Joseph did not profit from it, so therefore we can't hold him guilty of anything. And also there are some other theologians who are saying that Joseph, he knew what he was doing is wrong, but because of the fact that he was under the leadership of Pharaoh, he had no choice. So therefore he had us to make these decisions or implement all of these things that he was doing here because he was working for Pharaoh. But I find some of these things that they're saying, I really don't support it. I don't really agree with it, because when we look, we can see that Pharaoh gave Joseph a certain amount of power. Joseph was next to Pharaoh. Even there are some people who consider Joseph as a Pharaoh also, because of the fact that Joseph had so much power. So for us to say now that Joseph, he was not responsible for what was going on here, I think this is very dishonest. And for us to say that Joseph, he had us to obey the command of Pharaoh. He knew what he was doing is wrong, but because it was Pharaoh, he had us to do it. I think that is also very dishonest. I believe that Joseph, he was in charge, he was in control. He was next to the Pharaoh. And Joseph was doing what he think was going to be pleasing to Pharaoh. And whether or not he was receiving profits or any gain from these things, I don't know. But I don't think that he was innocent. I don't think that Joseph was being forced. You know, it's like you working on a job. If you're on a job and your boss wants you to do something that is wrong, let's suppose, you know, you're working in the bank. You're a banker, you're a bank teller, and you know, the manager come and say to you, every client or every customer that comes in, I want you to withdraw $20 from their account without telling them, and put it into the bank. You know, take it for the bank. Are you going to do that?
No, you can't.
No, you're not going to do that because you know it's wrong. You know, so when they say that Joseph, he knew what Pharaoh was telling him to do was wrong, but he was only doing it because he was under the control of Pharaoh, I don't think that doesn't really sound right. I believe that Joseph, he was in control and he knew what he was doing. He was not forced to do what he was doing. He did it because he think that it was the right thing to do. So it tells us in verse 21, and as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the border of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. So this is another thing again, you know. Joseph, he bought all of the lands from the people. And as we said last time, it is believed that Joseph bought the land. He bought all of these animals cheaper than what they really value. Some people think that he bought it 10 cents on the dollar. And 10 cents on the dollar is like, for instance, if you have something that worth 50, say $500, and somebody said they want to buy 10 cents on the dollar, it means that they will only pay $50 for that thing that worth $500. So what they're saying is that there's a possibility that all of these things that Joseph bought here, he did not buy it from the people at the value that these things value before the famine. They were reduced, drastically reduced. So in verse 21, as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the border of Egypt, even to the other end thereof. So what he did, after he acquired the land, he bought the land, he uprooted the people. People who were living in the north, he took them maybe to the south. Those who were in the east, he took them to the west. So he uprooted everybody. He just shifted everybody around. And what interpreters are saying, they are praising Joseph because they said what Joseph did. Joseph took all of the people who was far away from the storehouses because there was a severe famine. So Joseph was thinking about the people. So by uprooting them and bringing them closer to where the food was, he was showing them a favor. And this is what the interpreters are leaning to believe. Joseph did the people a favor by bringing them closer to where the food was. But if that was the case, now look for instance, the Israelite, they were living in Canaan, and they were journeying 200 and something miles or maybe more from Canaan to Egypt so that they can buy food. And you want to tell me people living in Egypt, they are saying that Joseph uprooted them and bring them closer to the storehouse because he was compassionate towards them. I don't think so. I think the reason why he uprooted them, and because he don't want them to hold any kind of a connection. He don't want them to have any connection with the land that he bought from them. So therefore he moved them off of the land. You know, if you have a piece of land and you sold it for somebody, and you receive payment for it, and the person say, man, you could stay on this piece of land as long as you want to. You know, even though you already get payment for the land, and you know that the person tell you can stay there, you still have a sense of connection to that land. But if you are moved off of the land, it means that, you don't really have any connection. And I think the reason why he moved them because he did not want them to feel that they still own the land. What he said is that you don't have any ownership. And I think it was a form of control. It was a form of control. Joseph, I guess, he wanted to have more control over the people. So that is what he was doing. He moved them from off the land. And it tells us in verse 22, is it? Yeah. Only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned to them by Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they sold not their land. So what is happening here is that the oldest person whose lands Joseph did not acquire, it was the lands of the priests. The priests that the land that the priests owned, because the Egyptians, they have their priests. Remember that Joseph, he married to one of the priest's daughter. So these priests, they have special privilege, and they didn't have to give up their lands, and they didn't have to pay for their food, because Pharaoh was supplying their food, and they have the title deed for their lands. So therefore, they didn't require to sell the land to Joseph. And also, it's not mentioned here, but the Israelite, they also have title deed to their land also. And the Israelite, apparently, they were not paying for their food. They were receiving their food because Pharaoh promised that he's going to give them the best of the land. He's going to, well, he promised to supply them with all of these things. So, although it is not mentioned here, in line with the priests here, also the Israelite, they have title deed to their land, while the Israelite who came into Egypt, because they were foreigners, they came into Egypt and they were given land and given title deed for their land. Here we are seeing that Egyptians who were born in Egypt, living there for generations, they have to give up all of their money, they have to give up all of their animals, they have to give up their lands, and also they were enslaved. And the Israelite who came in, and I think we're going to get into something else here too. The Israelite that came in, they retained everything that was lost by the Egyptian. It seems as though the Israelite got it, because they have lands, they have food, they have animals, and they have all of the things that the Egyptians gave up. They seems to be enjoying it. And the section here where he says that only the lands of the priests bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned to them by Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they sold not their lands. Now what interpreters are saying is that they commend Joseph for not taking away the lands from the priests. He did not interfere, only call it the church. And this is the only time that they will associate a godliness or say, well, these Egyptian priests were, a part of the church. So what they're saying is that they commend Joseph because Joseph did not take away church property. Did not take away the property of the priest. So therefore, they commend him. And what they're saying is that just like how Joseph did not take away the properties of these priests, is the same thing in our time today. Government not supposed to they're not supposed to interfere, or they're not supposed to try to confiscate, properties that churches have. And they're supposed to more or less stay out of church business. And they try to use what was done here by Joseph to say, well, this is what Joseph did. And my point here is that they only using this situation here, they're cherry picking this situation here because of the fact that it have to do with because Joseph did not take away these properties from the priest. They only using that, and they're saying, well, he did not take away the priest's property. And they see them at this particular time as godly people. But otherwise, they don't really see them as godly people. And yes, they're pagans. And the only reason that they're associating godliness to them here is because we can use it today in our time as a reference to say, well, Joseph, he was good to these priests, and he was in the government of Egypt, and he did not confiscate their property. So today, it's an example to show that government not supposed to, interfere in church business, church affairs, confiscate properties that belong to religious organization. And it tells us, then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your lands for Pharaoh. And the question that we could ask is Joseph boasting? Is he boasting? Is he, he just bought all of their lands? He took all of their monies. He took all of their animals, and he enslaved them. So now he's telling them, today, this day, have I bought Where is that? Verse what? 22? 23. Joseph said to the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your lands from Pharaoh. So why is he saying that? He already bought them. What is he boasting because of what he have done? Is he trying to say to them that I am in control of you, I own you? Is that what he's trying to do?
I believe that he reinforcing the fact.
Reinforcing the fact.
Yeah, saying that you don't have nothing again. You belong to me, I'm Pharaoh.
It's like, you know, when you say to your wife, you are my wife,
Yeah.
what are you trying to do? When you say to your wife, you don't say that?
Yeah, that she know that she belongs to you. You're the one. Yeah.
But I think that is what he's doing here. He is reinforcing to them that Pharaoh owns them or Egypt owns them. They don't belong to themselves anymore because he have already enslaved them. And he let them know that, behold, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. So that's why I'm sure, yes, I would.
That's why I did ask it last week. Were these people controlled or under the leadership of Pharaoh before?
But yes, it was Egypt. Yes, there was.
But they seems to be was self-governing by themselves. Even if they were under Egypt.
Well, they were under Egypt, but the thing is, I don't think that the taxes that we see that Joseph is going to impose on them here, it seems as though they wasn't paying that kind of a taxes, and they were in control of their lands. Pharaoh didn't own the land before. They have their own animals. They own the animals, they have money, they have lands, they have their house and stuff like that. But after the famine came, Pharaoh, Joseph took in all of the money from Canaan and Egypt. They bought the food, so they lost all of their money. All of their money was placed into Pharaoh's treasury. Then Joseph asked them, well, they brought in the animals. That's the reason why the theologians are saying we can't blame Joseph, because Joseph didn't demand for them to bring their animals in. It's the people who surrender their animals to him. So they didn't have any more money, and they brought the animals that they have, and Joseph took the animals. So he's in control of all of the animals, he's in control of all of the money. Then they need more food again, and they came in, and Joseph said, well, they offer their lands. They offer their lands to him, and also they offer themselves to him. And he bought their lands, and also he bought them. So before, these people, they have money, they have animals, and they have their house, they have their lands, and they have themselves. But up to this point, where we are here now, Joseph and the state of Egypt owns everything. Right. And that's the reason why I was saying last week, that is what communism is all about. Yeah. That's communism. That's when, you know, all of the property becomes state-owned. And who's going to like that? I mean, say, if you're born into that, you might like it. But, you know, for instance, we here in Canada, if we're not accustomed with that, and, you know, the government should try to enforce that, you know, nobody's not going to settle for that. If the government want to take away whatever money you have in your bank, and they want to take your house, you know, whatever you have, your car, they want to be in charge of that, nobody's not going to settle for that. But that is what Joseph was doing here. So that's the reason why I'm saying, I don't think this was godly. When you look at this, when you look at what was happening here, all of these things that Joseph doing here, would you say that was God's doing it? Was it godly?
I would say it's similar like that because...
was it godly?
It's in a form.
Oh, yeah. All right. Because, where's the mic? Where's the mic?
You might take it to
what comes to conclusion is like...
I changed it. Give him the mic. It's red?
Yeah.
Well, get the battery up here. Go ahead, brother. I'm hearing you.
Yeah. The reason why I said that because remember, okay, God have Jacob and Joseph there, right, as a God person. And he expects now the children of Israel to come in. So God now is he's showing his favor to Joseph. And remember that part just raised there, that the Pharaoh gave him the land. Mm-hmm. So while Joseph was there, God is giving his land peace. And remember when Joseph there, what did Pharaoh do to the people of Israel? You oppressed them. Mm-hmm. So God will show them the Israelite camp in favor for the Israelites.
Okay.
Yes, and now they have the best part of the land. God has the man right there. So God upon it.
Well,
Yeah, God upon it.
well, I personally, I don't think what Joseph did here, even though it's in the Bible, that's the reason why I was saying, it doesn't mean because something is written down in the Bible that God approved of it.
Right.
I don't believe that God approved of Joseph. As I was saying before, when he took their money, I believe that taking money for the food was right. But I think after the money run out, Joseph should have stopped. He should not have taken their animals. I don't think he should have taken away their lands. I don't think he should have enslaved them. I think that was wrong. I could have seen that he taken money from them for the food. Because as I said before, in a situation like that, if he was giving out food for free, people, knowing that they can go and get food for free, they may not take good care of the food. But if you know that you're paying for the food, then whatever food you have, you know that you have to be responsible in using it. But I think he probably should not have taken away their animals. And even though he take the animals from them, okay, let's suppose he go one step further and he decide to take the animals. After he finished taking away the animals, I think he should have stopped. He should have not taken away their lands, and he should not have enslaved them. I think Joseph went too far. That's my way of looking at it.
Pastor, 1 minute, let me ask a question.
Yes.
If we're gonna based on opinion,
Yeah.
then the word semantic have no meaning in it. Have no meaning. So we must look at the semantic.
This
This is
is
very important.
this is not.
If you go based on opinion, semantic is excluded from that.
Okay, all right.
Semantic is very important there. So you have to say exactly what is semantic mean.
Let me see if I can address that. We said, okay, interpreters said that Joseph is a type of Jesus or Yeshua in more than 100 different ways. And the way I think we could answer that, if Yeshua was there at the time, you think, let us suppose that this situation should take place during the lifetime of Yeshua. You think he would have do what Joseph was doing here?
Well, Pastor.
Do you think Jesus would have done that?
Okay, this is the okay.
No, yes or no?
Well, let us make it clear. Now, what God is trying to do, right? Now, we have to look at when Adam fell, right? Man lost communication. Now, God is looking to make communication back to man, right? And man is not at 100% godly, right? So Joseph now is an economist. That's what he's doing. He's trying to bring revenue for the economy. And that is a good way to bring in revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to bring revenue.
But bringing revenue, but
Yes.
who is he? He's only helping the state.
We just read that he go and he proved the Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to bring revenue.
Okay, as I said, I personally, I don't think that, I don't support some of these things that Joseph did here. Even though it's in the Bible, I believe that, even though it's in the Bible, Joseph, he could have made mistakes. He was a man just like any other man. Joseph was not a superhuman. Joseph was not, he was not a spiritual being. He wasn't even a spiritual being. Joseph was a natural man, you know that? Joseph was a natural human being, a person who had faults, a person who made mistakes. As I custom saying, he put on his pants one leg at a time, and he made mistakes. He was just, as the Bible said, Elijah was a man who was subject to like passion. You believe that Elijah was a man? The Bible says he was a man, and he prayed honestly that he reigned not for the space of 3 years and 6 months, and he did not reign, but he was a man. And it's the same thing that Joseph was a man, and what I'm saying is that Joseph could have made mistake just like anybody else, and maybe what he did here, it probably was a mistake that he made, and to cover it up. A lot of these things that we see Joseph is doing here, what some interpreters are saying is that where the lands and the animals is concerned, they say that Joseph restored the lands and he restored the animals, but the text never really tells that. But because of the fact that some interpreters, they know that this thing, it does not look right. So what they say is that Joseph restore the land and Joseph restore the animals to them. But the text really didn't say that to us. But you know what I was trying to say, if we say that Joseph is a type of Christ in more than 100 different ways, and we have to ask the question, what will Jesus do? Would Yeshua do the same thing? Would he take away the people's land? Would he enslave them? You think he will do that? I don't think so. So that's the reason why I'm saying I believe that Joseph went too far in some of these things that he was implementing here. Even though it is written down in the Bible, it don't have to be, it was right what he was doing. Just like we today, we in leadership in the church, we might do things, but it's not everything that we do might be of God.
But Pastor, when I really studied, they said the same thing what Joseph did. The same system we're in Egypt today. The same system? Yes.
Okay, all right, I don't know.
Yes, when I studied, they said the same. It might be
well, yes, the text, in terms of the taxes, we're going to come down to that. I see what you're saying. So, where we are, what verse is that? 23. Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Behold, here is seed. We have to touch on that. Here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. So that's the reason why I'm saying, Joseph, he's the one that gave the prophecy that it's going to have 7 years of plenty and then seven years of famine. The 7 years of plenty already finished. They were in the 7 years of famine. And they were close to the completion of the 7 years of famine. And Joseph, he knew when the 7 years of famine was coming to an end. And what I'm saying, instead of he implementing some of these tough measures that he implemented here, by taking the people's land and enslaving them, he could have advanced them food. Because as I said before, the food that Joseph was selling to the people, it wasn't the state of Egypt food. It was the people's food. Joseph took that 20% from the people. It wasn't the Pharaoh's food that he was selling. He was selling back the food, the 20% that the people gave to him in the time of plenty. He was selling back that 20% food to them. So here we are seeing that he's giving them seed so that they can plant the land. And what this is telling us is that the 7 years of famine, it was coming to an end. It probably was in the last year. When Joseph took away their land and took away, made them slave, interpreters are saying there's a possibility that could have been the last year of the famine. And what I'm saying, if that was the last year of the famine, or the famine was coming to an end, instead of taking their land and enslaving them, Joseph could have advanced them food. He could have, give them a credit. And the bottom of the text here in 23 says, behold, here is seed for you. So what does that tell you? When you give somebody seed, to plant, it means that, harvest time of planting time is near. And what Joseph is saying here is that, or what the text is indicating to us, is that the time to plant wasn't far away. And that's the reason why some interpreters saying that what was happening here, this was coming to the end. The famine was coming to an end. And that is the reason why I'm saying Joseph should not have taken away the people's land, and he should not have enslaved them, because the famine was coming to an end. If he was that good leader that all of us claiming him to be, what he should have done was to trust them, as we say, or he could have give them the food and credit, but he didn't do that. He took away everything from them, and even enslaved them.
But I have one question,
Okay, let's say before this famine, right?
Yes.
Let's say the Pharaoh got little revenue.
The what?
He didn't get much revenue.
He didn't get much revenue.
He didn't get much revenue before the famine.
Right.
And now that you see an area where you could make more revenue and it would benefit. So which one will you choose then? In that sense, I see something similar happening in Grenada, right? I see something similar happening in Grenada here. Let's make a point. When the Colonite people was in Grenada, right, they had a lot of estates, and the people used to produce a lot. Now they take the land from them and they give to the people. What happened to the land? Not even the planting.
Not much, you don't get
They don't plant at all. So now that they take over the land, they're going to get more production.
What do you mean when the government take over the land?
Yes, they will get more production.
Well, you know, that's the reason why
some control the government. So the friends are
they'll promote a lot of stuff. I see green and fall flat. People don't know because they take over the land. And they give it to the people and they put out in.
Well, that's why some interpreters are saying that the people had to be blamed because Joseph gave them advance warning that there was 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine coming. And what they're saying is that during the time when they have the 7 years of famine, plenty, the people should have saved and they should have put away food. Yes, I agree with that, but we're missing one point. That the 20% that Joseph put away, it wasn't Joseph's food. It wasn't Pharaoh's food. It was food that Joseph take from the people. So yes, the people should have, they should not just depend on that 20% that Joseph was putting away. But what interpreters are doing, they're putting all of the blame on the people. They said that the people were idle and they were not thinking. And they leave all of the thinking up to Joseph, and therefore they have to take the blame. And what they experienced during that time, they can't put any blame on Joseph. But what Joseph did, he even take away their freedom. And interpreters say, well, you know, freedom is not something that is guaranteed to everybody. Liberty is not guaranteed to every person. They say that if you're free, you can't say, well, that is something that every person should have. You know, your liberty, and it's true, your liberty, you can lose your liberty. In this country, we say we have liberty, but the government can take away liberty from us if they choose to. But, you know, where human being is concerned, where good treatment, if you are a human person and you say you are a person of God, you should not take away the liberty from a fellow human person. I don't think so. So it tells us in 23, we're still on 23? Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Behold, here is seed, and you shall sow the land. So as I was saying, the famine was coming to an end. Joseph, he gave them seed to sow the land. And the reason why he gave them seed to sow the land is because the famine was close to come to an end. So therefore, if the famine was close to come to an end, he didn't have any need to take away their land and to enslave them. I think that is where I think he started going too far. And in verse 24, and it shall come to pass in the increase that you shall give the 5th part to Pharaoh, and the 4th part shall be your own for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your household, and for food for your little ones. Anybody know what is the 5th part? What is the 5th part?
5th part is like they have $500 and they give $100 aside, like one part and the 5th.
Right. Okay.
Part, so you get the 4th part.
Okay, so the 5th part is really 20%. I think we dealt with that before. Remember when he, during the 7 years of plenty, they were supposed to put aside that 20% also. So it's the same thing here. After Joseph finished taking away their land and he enslaved them, have them as slaves. You know, when we talk about the slavery, it wasn't slavery like we know it. You know, the hardship kind of slavery that our ancestors went through. Slavery in Bible time wasn't like now. Because, you know, when you read in the Old Testament, you will see that if an Israelite fall on hard time and a person become poor during the time of the Israelite, they could have sell themselves to their neighbor or to one of their brethren. And they could have sold themselves or sold the whole family. But according to what the Bible said, you were supposed to still treat them in a humane way and treat them like your brother or your sister. And that slavery was for a certain time. If you enslave somebody, when the time or the year of Jubilee come around, because the Jubilee year is every 49 years. Every 49 years, if you sold your land, because you weren't supposed to sell the land, because the land back in that time belongs to God. All of the land belongs to God. But if you fall on hard time, and the inheritance that was given to you and your family, you see fit to give it out to somebody, when the year of Jubilee comes around, that 49 year come around, all of the land have to go back to the original owner. Anybody who was enslaved, they have to set them free. So slavery in Bible time, it was not as harsh as what we know about in our time. Yes, sir.
We practice the same thing today now.
Why is that?
The same thing like what Joseph did. Because, you know, in our country, not a small line country, we give a neighbor we land, and we say, you up the land food, you plant all the food, but you give me certain percentage of the food.
They call it sharecropping.
Sharecropping,
Yes.
But the same practice. So you doing all the slave work, and then just stretching down afterwards and get the money. Same thing practices.
So they, after he bought the land, he gave them seed, and then he told them that they have to pay taxes, or they have to give 20% to Egypt, to Pharaoh. And what he said, let me read this again. And it shall come to pass in the increase, that when you sow and you get a harvest, that you shall give the fifth part. The fifth part is 20%. And the fourth part shall be your own. So 80% will be for them. And the last time we were talking about applying this to ourselves, where when we work, we can, live on 80% of our income, and we try to put away 20%. And this is about the third time that I'm talking about this. And the last two times I spoke about it, I didn't really well receive. A lot of people say, well, I can't live on 80%, or I can't live on 70%. That is too little bit. But what this is showing us here is that Joseph is saying to these people that 20% of the harvest from the field, you have to give it to Pharaoh. And the other 80%, you have to live on that. You have to make do with that. And what I'm saying is that we can apply that to ourselves. For instance, you're working and you try to live on 80% of your income, and you try to put away 20%. And some people, depends on what you have plans for. Some people might even be able to put aside 30% and live on 70% because of the fact that you know what you want to achieve. But there's a lot of people say, well, I can't live on that. I have to have this and I have to have that, so therefore I can live on 70% or I can live on 80%. And when I look at what is happening in the world today, and I look at the way how people do things, people who working for years, and they refuse to cut back. They refuse to live on less. When I suffer myself, and I save my little bit, and I try to live on 70%, or maybe I try to live on 60%, and then you work in, and then you squander your money, you buy all of the expensive stuff. Because there's some people who change wardrobe every year, right? And some of these people, they buy the most expensive clothes, and they like to change their wardrobe, and they like to go out, they like to enjoy themselves, they like to go, to the movies, and they like to eat out a lot. And because of that, you find that they don't have a lot of money to save. So when somebody decides to bite the bullet, and you decide that you are going to cut corners, and you are going to, as we said, suck salt, and then you save up your money, and then when they fall and they see that they have a need, it's the same people who will come to you, and they come to you with the Bible, and they come to you with the scripture in their mouth, and say that the Lord said you're supposed to lend to your brother. I'm telling you, anybody up to this point, anybody from now on who come to me and want me to lend them money, it depends on who the person is. If you're a person who I know like to save, and you save it for something, and then you fall short, you don't have enough to do what you want to do, I know you as a saver. You're not a person who squander your money, and then you need a help from me, and I can help you, sure, I'm going to help you. But somebody who wants to squander, person who wants to eat out all the time, person who don't want to get up in the morning and make their lunch and take their lunch to work, and a person who eating and living, they're getting paid and they're living from paycheck to paycheck, and they depend on, figuring out when they have a need, they're going to come to me and figure because they know I pass along and I'll help them out. I'm telling you, not going to happen. Not going to happen. I'm not doing that again. Not doing that again. I cut out all of that. That is a no-no. So when we are in verse what? 25. And they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servant. So the people, they came to Joseph. After Joseph did all of that to them, what do you expect them to say? These people are broken.
Yeah, I'm nothing.
He break their spirit. What are you going to say? You take away all the money, you take all the animals, you take all the land, then you enslave them. You already said to them, you are my slave, you are my servant. What do you expect these people to say? Interpreters are saying they came here and they thanked Joseph for saving their lives, because if Joseph did not put away the food, they would, and take their animals, all the animals will suffer. If he didn't take care of their lands, all of the lands will, you won't have anybody because they will die, so you won't have nobody to work the land. So therefore they are thanking Joseph for saving their lives. And this is where they put the, yes, yes sir, go ahead.
Well, I guess it's pretty much once you get into Exodus, this is more or less like a retribution kind of thing when it comes to the people of Israel at the time, because the Egyptians sold themselves to Pharaoh, and then I guess at some point, I guess after Joseph died and all that stuff, they decided to do it back to the to the people.
Okay.
Because if, let's say, it's only the nation of Israel that has been getting supported by Joseph, it's going to, tell the people of Egypt, these guys, they're prospering while we suffer.
Okay.
So this is more or less like retribution to, those people because of all
that. It's a good thing it's not we who said it. That's how the interpreters put it over. I know we're going to come to that. So they said, they thanked Joseph for saving their life. Let us find grace in thy sight, in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servant. Who is going to want to be somebody's servant? Whether slavery back in that time was, more mild, whatever. You don't want to be anybody's servant. You don't want a person to have all of your money in their pocket. You don't want somebody to own your lands. You don't want nobody to take away all the animals that you have. You don't want that. So what I'm saying here is that I believe that these people are broken. And what else they're going to say? If I was there and he did that to me, maybe I would have said the same thing too. So I don't think it's because they're really enjoying what Joseph did to them, why they made this statement. I believe it is because they were under such a control, and he enforced this, taxes on them. What we have to understand to it is when these people in government, you see what Joseph did here, he bring in the 20% taxes. It's the same thing they do, the same thing during the time when they have the war going on in the United States, when they have the civil war in the United States. They didn't have personal tax. People wasn't paying personal tax. Personal taxes came in the United States after they have the civil war, and I think close to 1 million people died, and there was so much debts to pay off. The government at the time, they brought in personal income tax. And personal income tax was to pay off the debt. But when the debt was paid off, they didn't cancel the tax. They continue taking the tax. It's the same thing here in Canada. They didn't have personal income tax here in Canada. Personal income tax in Canada came in after the First World War. The First World War in 1914 to pay off for this debt, because the First World War, I think it's 20 million people get killed. and 21 people were injured during that time. So all of this debt mounted up, and they didn't have any personal income tax, so therefore they implement personal income tax. So when the debt was already paid off, they never cancel it. No, it was supposed to be cancelled, but they never canceled because, money coming in, and, as the brother was saying here about Joseph, I guess he didn't have enough money, because government never have enough. It doesn't matter how much they have. They still feel that's not enough.
But
So,
Pastor, look at a good part there with Joseph. What I already see here, what you just mentioned here, what you mentioned.
He talked about he gave them seeds.
uh-huh.
Right? Not say we're not farming, right? And we have like corn. We might eat seed, but no corn. We might eat everything. But Joseph was save seeds. For when the time go back normal. That's excellent. You do excellent.
But yes, I understand that. But Brother Lewis, it was a people's seed. It was a people's seed.
But Joseph know definitely. If they had kept that seed, they like eat everything.
Well, listen, the thing is that, and I agree with some interpreters.
They like everything.
In the sense that what they say is that the people, they should not depend on Joseph alone to do all of the saving of the food. They should have saved their own food, because what you have to take into consideration, the 7 years was a bumper crop. The 7 years wasn't ordinary, food coming in, It was a bumper crop. They was receiving a large amount of food. So therefore, even though Joseph take 20%, yes, they should have really maybe saved another 10% for themselves. But they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They depend on Joseph. So that's why interpreters are saying that the people, they dig a hole for themselves. They have to take the blame for themselves. But it was their food. He was selling them their food. The thing is, he didn't pay them for the food. If he didn't pay them for the food and then he's selling them back the food, then I could have been in agreement with that. Now, let me see if we could close out. It says, 26, and Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests, only which became not Pharaoh. So Joseph implemented that law in the time of adversities. As I just said, taxes. When these government want to bring in taxes is when people suffering, is when some kind of adversity going on in the nation, they'll implement a tax and they will give you the impression that this thing is only for time. I think right here in Ontario too, I think years ago when they brought in, I think was the $700 healthcare thing, I think that was supposed to be for a short time. And even was it the GST? One of those taxes, the GST and the PST, yes. They were saying that it was supposed to be for a short space of time, and this government said, well, they're going to move it, and so on. So this is how these government does bring in taxes. In times when they figure that they have a need to do something, they will implement a tax and make the people feel that, well, they will take it away, but they're not going to move it. It stayed there. This tax that Joseph put in stay there, as the brother said, it's still operational right now in Egypt. Now, it tells us in verse 27, and Israel dwelled in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possession therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. This is a very troubling portion of scripture. The way how Bible interpreters interpret this is very troubling. And these are the things that really make me think when I look at certain things in the Bible. Now, interpreters are saying that the people who are living here in Goshen, they call them Israelites. Remember that they were in Canaan living? If you look on a map, you will see what they call Canaan is modern day Israel. It is just north of Egypt. And the Israelite, Jacob and his family was living in Canaan, and according to what the text tells us, was it 70 of them? 70 of them? Well, we know according to, what interpreters are saying, it was really 70 leaders. That 70 that we saw there, it was 70 leaders. But there's a possibility that it could be maybe 200 or 300 people, because they have servants that came with them. So there's a possibility that there was maybe 200 or 300 people that came down from Canaan with Joseph. and they leave Canaan. Canaan is right here. Egypt is right here. And they came and they lived in Goshen. Goshen is right on the border of Egypt. So they didn't go far into Egypt.
Right.
And what theologians are telling us, that all of the people in Canaan at the time, ancient Canaan, which was African black people who were living there, and also all of the people in Egypt at the time, ancient Egyptian, also was black people who was living there. That is what history book and different historians are telling us. But here we see right on the border here, where these people are living, this handful of people, a couple hundred people living, what they said is that that handful of people is white people, is Europeans living there. And all of the people in Canaan, you remember we study and the text tells us that all of the people in Canaan, they were suffering with hunger. All of the people, all of Egypt, all of Canaan, which is just north of Egypt, suffering hunger. All of Egypt, just south of Canaan, suffering with hunger. Right between Egypt and Canaan, there's a group of people living there, and they experience no famine. They have all of their lands, they have all of their animals, and these people that were living there, this little group of people, is European people. And I say, according to the history of the time, back in that time, it wasn't European people living there. And if we have to take this interpretation, that it was European people who escaped that famine, what we are saying is that God don't like black people, and God don't like people of color. And it seems as though God is a God who is, when he's putting out racism. Because how can you have these people here suffering famine, and people down here suffering famine, and this little group of people right between there, they don't experience no famine at all? I believe that the people who were between Egypt and Canaan, living in Goshen, it wasn't European people like what the interpreters are saying. It was black-skinned people who were living there. And that's the reason why I'm saying these things really, when I look at these things and I see what interpreters are saying, it really makes me become upset. And knowing that these interpreters, they are not truthful. And you know what worries me? When I read history and I see that the people who mistreat other people, they mistreat other races of people, they do so much a hurtful thing to other races of people. These are the same people who come and interpret the Bible.
Yeah.
That don't worry you?
Yeah.
It don't worry you. When you look into history, you see what European people do to black people, what they do to the Chinese people, what they did to the Indian people, what they did to the native Indian people, the people over in Australia, the Aboriginal people, what they did to them. People all around, what the hurt and the bad things that they portray upon all nations of people. And then that same group of people come and interpret the Bible, not writing the Bible. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The same people who interpret the Bible is the same people who do all of the wickedness throughout the ages. So people expect me, when I read these interpretations and read these commentaries, I'm supposed to just believe it because of the fact that they say it's godly people who write these things. So therefore, I have to take it and believe it. But when I look at this text, I see where racism and white supremacy start from. Because when they tell us this group of people living right between Canaan and Egypt was European, and they don't suffer nothing. They don't suffer no hunger. They have all of the prosperity, and they were living right there. And interpreters are saying it is Europeans. What I'm seeing there, it shows us how these people get that entitlement spirit, that they're supposed to get the best. Look what's going on right here in Canada right now. We have all of the roadblocks, the train, they're still blocking the train line. The train line, these native people, I know other people supporting them to blocking the train line. And people will say, why don't we just get the police and move them away? Because of the fact they're not listening to the native people for years, hundreds of years. You go in and a native community, you will see that these native people, some of them don't even have running water. They don't have flush toilet. These people have to go outside in winter and use outside toilet. Their children don't have the same kind of schooling, the accommodation that most people have in school. They don't have it. And these are the people who everybody else came and meet them here. Yeah. And nobody that listened to them. But the other people who come, they think that they're entitled to everything. And that entitlement, it came right out from the interpretation of the Bible. These interpreters interpret it in a way that white people, European people, entitled to the best. And we have seen it right here in the text.
Pastor, if I could interject.
Yes, sir.
Just interject.
The point I'm making here is like, this part of the scripture explains everything from Genesis chapter 10.
What he said?
Yes. So he said that Abraham went from the land of what? The Chaldees.
Yes.
Where the Chaldees, so that traced it back, Egypt and Ethiopia. So he traveled up there. So it's the same black people.
Well, you see, brother, that's the reason why I'm saying.
Bible give you the answer.
When we see these things, people will say that it's very divisive and it's very confusion making and you're trying to put things in people's head. But I am not telling you something that I'm making up. I'm sure you guys have commentaries. Tell us what, and you have commentaries? Ella Lewis, you have commentaries? This is what the commentators them telling us. The commentators them telling us that Canaanite was black people, Egyptian was black people, but right between here, use your common sense. Right between Egypt and Canaan, you have a group of people, just maybe say 200-300 people, and they don't experience no famine. They're growing, they're multiplying, they're increasing, but all around Canaan and Egypt, they experience all of the suffering. And what I'm saying, if this was European people living there and experiencing all of that good thing, it means that the God that we say we are serving don't like black people. And he liked Europeans, he liked white people, and he is racist against black people and people of color. And I believe that is not true. But that is how it is painted in Bible interpretation. And I want you to understand that racism, white supremacy didn't start with the KKK. The KKK in America, they didn't start racism, white supremacists. Racism, white supremacists start by Bible interpreters. In people who interpret the Bible, these things that we have in today where racism is concerned, they take Bible, they take scriptures, and they interpret it, and they say this is what the Bible means. Because when you use your common sense and you look at that and see the people living in Canaan supposed to be black people, the people in Egypt is black people, they are all suffering famine, and right between Canaan and Egypt is one little group of white people, and they don't experience no famine. God just blessed them, he increased them. And in closing, Arnell was making the point there, and what one interpreter was saying this morning, that what we see here, that the Jewish people being European and experience all of the goodness of God here, they didn't experience no famine during that time. He take it back to the Second World War, when Germany was going down, the economy in Germany was going down. Just like how these people lost all of their money, all of their farm, all of their animals and their homes and stuff like that, in Germany the same thing happened. And what the interpreter is saying is that at the time when the German economy was going down and they're losing everything that they lose go into the hands of the Jews. And the bankers at the time was the Jews, and all of the financial giants was the Jews. So what, as Andel was making the point, what he said is that God do the same thing here in the time of Joseph, in that he allowed the Jewish European people here to build up all of the wealth. So after a while, the Egyptians get to hate them. And that is what caused the persecution of the Israelites in Egypt, where they were enslaved for 400 years. But God did that for a purpose. The reason why God enriched them in that kind of way is because He did it so that after a while the Egyptians is going to get against them and they will be enslaved, and then he will deliver them. So, you know, as I was trying to say, these racist ideology is so-called men, not women, so-called men of God that take Bible, take scriptures, and they interpret it in that kind of way. And because of that, racism and white supremacy keep spreading. And until we decide that we are going to stand up and say, this is not how the Bible is supposed to be interpreted. I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm not saying that the Bible is not true. And I hope people are not going away with that idea that Pastor is going to say that the Bible is not true. What I'm saying is that the interpretation of the Bible, there is something drastically wrong with the way how some of these interpreters are interpreting the Bible. The way how they interpret it strengthens racism, white supremacy. And we as children of God, we need to be honest when it comes to these things and try to see the truth. May the Lord bless us. Anybody have any comment or a question that you'd like to ask before we close up, or we close it up today?
I would like to make a simple comment. I was just studying, because I mentioned that before, we studied somebody thing with the Greeks. We know we had three thinkers, they called Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. There's three guys.
I didn't get that, go over that, brother.
Yes, Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle.
Yes.
Right. These three guys was thinkers.
Thinkers, yes.
So they come with a philosophy. They call, okay, who going to be the leader of the world? And they say the Greek is the first civilization to document systematic studies on human behavior.
Okay.
So they say the people are supposed to lead, so they say the gods tell them that. The people are supposed to lead, they're supposed to have some trait, they're supposed to look like something. They say they're supposed to have thin lips, straight nose, blue eyes, and blonde hair. These are the people that are supposed to lead. So they call it leadership philosophy. And the inventor what they call flamboyant. So you see, I thought it's kind of flamboyant attitude. If you don't have it, you're not a leader. So look at me as black people. The Greeks cancel us. They cancel us completely, because look at me. Big nose, big mouth, right face. Well, if you was kinky, you would have had it. So the Greeks are cancel me. So that is the thing that they are carrying today. So the other nation take it. So even those people, but what did I realize? The people that have this certain kind of skin, I was studying it, is when you lose some kind of vitamin in the body, your body don't produce no more. So you have this kind of thing called blonde hair. So the body, there's certain kind of things in the body begin to reduce that. So these people have this kind of complexion.
Well, listen, I'm not so worried about what the historians say, although what they're saying is damaging also, but it's what we get from people who claim to be born again. When we look at so-called church leaders who say that they're spiritual giants, and they're telling us these things, and they write it down, they put it down in writing, and they projecting that kind of ideology, that is very damaging. And that is the things that I totally stand against. May the Lord bless us. Most High God, we thank you for allowing us to be here. Thank you, Lord. Father, help us, oh God, even as we look into your words, help us to be honest, oh God, when we need to change there, Father God. Help us, oh God, to bow to the authority of your words. Father, we humble ourselves before you even as we go forward. Bless us. We ask of you in the name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. Praise the Lord.